So, the Black Lives Matter movement on my campus was definitely a turning point for me in my journey because Mike Brown was killed the summer of 2014, and after Mike Brown was killed, I was emailing with other Black student leaders and we were asking ourselves and each other, how can this happen? Like, what are we gonna do about this? And we were just brainstorming. People were throwing out ideas like we could do a scholarship program in his honor, we could do this, we could do that, maybe a vigil. We ended up coming to campus and deciding to do a vigil. And we also started a Black Leadership Coalition to kind of make sure that Black student groups were able to collaborate. So this was one of our first things doing together. And so we booked space on campus and we started spreading the word that we were going to be doing a vigil for not only Mike Brown, but Eric Garner, who was also killed by police. And we got a lot of good turnout. A diverse group of student groups came and participated. And we had a Jewish student group sharing a prayer. I was the vice president of the gospel choir and we sang a song. I spoke in the opening, my friend spoke in the ending. There was just so much participation. There were like maybe 200 students there. We were a relatively small campus, like maybe only 5,000. So it felt like a really strong show of support. And so we had that vigil, but that wasn't the end because then there was the time to find out whether Darren Wilson, who killed Mike Brown, was going to be indicted. So we organized a town hall. Me and a few other students worked with the director of the Multicultural Center to organize a town hall for people to be able to watch the decision about the indictment. So we ordered pizza. We all got together in this hall called Wig Clio. And we watched as President Obama announced to us that Darren Wilson was not going to be indicted for killing Mike Brown. And it was such a disappointing and heavy moment. It's hard for me to put into words what that moment was like. There was such a thick feeling of disappointment and anger in the room. And we cried and we held each other and we spoke our minds. When my friend Malachi did spontaneous spoken word in that moment, my professor, Eddie Glaude, he shared a reflection with us, and it was a powerful and emotional moment that I will never forget. And it was a moment that I would say that I became activated because at one point my vice president of BSU at that time was like, so what are we gonna do? And then I'm on a Facebook thread and I'm finding out that there's people that are getting materials together to protest in the student center. And so we all start spreading the word. We change into all Black and we go to the student center and we start making posters, and we basically go and decide to protest and do a Black Lives Matter protest on the street where students normally party. And everybody was partying because it was like the Monday before we left for Thanksgiving break, and they called it Drinksgiving, and they would go out and get drunk and party. But this was also the night that we found out about the non-indictment, so it wasn't that type of occasion for us. And so we went and we shut down the street and we did a Black Lives Matter protest.
No justice! Black Lives Matter! No justice! No peace! 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 Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot!
Many students were told to wear black and stand in solidarity. Many students who came to party on the street have chosen to instead join the movement, and it is incredible. There's so many students out here.
No justice! No justice! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace!
Some students were like screaming in retaliation that white lives matter. Some people were being really disrespectful, but we didn't care. We were going hard, and we had like kind of an impromptu rally. I remember speaking then and literally saying like, we were gonna fight this if we have to until we die. And it's crazy just thinking back to saying that then, because I meant it, and I'm still doing this work, and I will literally be doing this work until I die. Hopefully I believe we can leave things better for our kids, right? And so that wasn't the end, because obviously when Mike Brown was killed, things were picking up all over the country and protests were happening all over the country, and we got word of a national blackout, a walkout where students across the country were being encouraged to walk out of their classes for a Black Lives Matter protest. And so we planned to participate in that. We talked about things we could do. I remember thinking and saying, what if we did a die-in, and kind of laid out to signify and to remember how Mike Brown was left in the in the street for 4.5 hours. And so we ended up planning a die-in and a walkout and spreading the word, flyers all around campus, telling all the people, like, walk out of your classes on this day. I think it was like at 11:30 a.m. Go to the Frist Campus Center. That was like our student center. And we're going to have this rally and we're going to have this die-in. I was lucky enough to be in an African American studies class where my professor actually walked out with us. And he taught about police brutality and the history of it before we all walked out of class. We had the rally and people spoke, and I'll never forget what people said. One of the students was like, "Don't make me raise kids in this world."
Hands up, don't shoot! Hands up, don't shoot! Hands up, don't shoot! Hands up, don't shoot! Hands up! We stand in solidarity with the people of Ferguson and others in demanding an end to racialized state violence. The issue of racialized state violence has eliminated racial issues existing on campus that we aim to transform.
As the lives of many Black Americans, countless, have been and continue to be interrupted constantly by the oppressive culture of systemic racism. So we are here, in part, for Ferguson and for Mike Brown. But not just for Ferguson and for Mike Brown. Our purpose is far greater. Our mission extends to thousands, to millions of Black bodies, imprisoned in silence, imprisoned in death, imprisoned in their own Blackness by the American racial state. We stand in solidarity with Ferguson. We stand in solidarity with the nation. We stand in solidarity with each other. No justice.
No peace.
No peace. Black lives matter. So now we shall commence the die-in in silence for 45 minutes to symbolize the 4.5 hours that Michael Brown's body was left in the streets of Ferguson.
It was a lot. It was really emotional, and we did the die-in. There were so many people that participated. It's the biggest protest I ever saw at Princeton. I think it was the biggest protest in some years, but there were like 500 people participating, and we have a campus of like 5,000. So pretty decent group. But then there were some people that were like just walking over us when we were, laid out in front of the Frist Campus Center. So that was kind of tough too. So there was support, but there was also opposition. There was this app called Yik Yak where people were, saying things like, the coloreds are getting militant, call the National Guard, and like saying all these terrible things about student protesters. But it was also amazing to see the support that we were able to bring together for that moment. And what it turned into was challenging racism, not only in the country, but at Princeton, and saying, okay, we're standing against police brutality, we're standing against mass incarceration, but Princeton, you need to do better. Princeton, Black students are hurting right here. So we're not gonna just protest this as though it's an out there thing. Like, what are we gonna do to clean up house? And so that's when those demands that I was talking about that I had from the spring when we did our original campaign, the I Twin Princeton campaign, came in handy. And I just remember handing that over to the group. There was essentially a group of us now that had formed that were planning these protests and organizations. And we eventually, after one really, really long night of deliberation, decided to call ourselves the Black Justice League. I remember handing that over and us kind of workshopping and adding on and coming up with demands and bringing it to the university and saying, okay, what are you gonna do? These are our demands, and it had to do with making African American studies a major. It had to do with giving more support for Black students and students that experience racism on campus. It had to do with a diversity requirement and cultural competency training and all these different things. We had a lot of demands. We started meeting with administration of the university administration. We started meeting with them. I remember meeting with the vice president of the university like every week for like at 8:30 in the morning on a Monday, and just talking and expressing our concerns. And eventually the university decided to start a task force on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And a few of us from the protest group, the Black Justice League, were tapped to serve on it. And I served on the policy committee. And kind of out of that whole process came some different wins. There were different wins, and I'm skipping over some things. There were more events on campus, more racist events, more, issues, but out of that process, we did get departmental status for the African American Studies department. And so my class couldn't major in African American Studies, but the class after me could, which is a really cool experience and feeling to be a part of. Then we got more funding for the Multicultural Center. So they completely renovated the Multicultural Center, and they like put pictures of our protests. They put, chants from our protests on the walls, all these different inspirational quotes.
Bruh, I didn't even realize I was here. Look, it's me behind old girl.
Way more like history of people of color at Princeton.
Dude, they remodeled in here. I love this.
Programs, things that are going on.
They gave way more funding to diversity. They hired a diversity officer, all these different things. On one hand, it wasn't enough, but on the other hand, at the time, it was really powerful to see that our protests actually brought about some kind of change at the university. And that was really powerful to be a part of. The following year, when I was at Princeton, there was a whole nother round of protests that I was less involved in because I had by that time taken a step back from the Black Justice League, but I was more so protesting in support and in solidarity as a Black student on campus, where we protested for affinity spaces and for them to change the name of the public policy school and all these other things. And that was kind of cool because, it wasn't cool at the time. They really did not respond well. There were alumni saying that we should be shot, the student protesters should be shot. There was all types of stuff. We slept outside this place where the Black Justice League was occupying the president's office. We slept outside in solidarity with them, and people were guarding the building but were not protecting us. It was crazy. But even those protests yielded fruit. Like eventually there were affinity spaces created for Black students, and they did 5 years later change the name of the Woodrow Wilson School. And at the time they named buildings on campus after Black folks. And so just kind of being a part of that whole process of first and foremost building community with Black students, but then protesting and advocating and seeing things change. And even we connected with students at other schools who were activists. We went to this I2M Harvard Blacktivism conference and met up with students from Princeton and University of Michigan who were also, lobbying their administration, and we're exchanging strategies. And it just felt like we were part of this whole movement. And seeing how that really changed the campus and how I could literally go back and say these things happened because of a movement that we were a part of, it kind of showed me that that's what I wanted to do in my life and in my career. And so at first I was thinking, because I got so into my research when I was at Princeton, I was thinking, I want to get my PhD, I want to become a professor. But the more that I did the organizing work, the more I was like, I think I want to do this kind of active work of really getting active changes made.
Black excellence and representation and justice and equality within the Christian space, within the campus space, and just everywhere. You have single-handedly carried True Thursday and Black people in PFA on your back. You have labored and worked to make Black people feel represented. You've worked to make me feel represented. Every time I see you, I know that it's okay to be here. You make me feel more like a Princeton student. You make me feel like I can belong in spaces where maybe I don't. And just the way that you carry yourself with confidence just inspires me. Just watching you just take down white spaces every single where that you go, just asserting your dominance and just asserting that you are there. You just inspire me to just be better than who I am. So just thank you so much for doing that within the church. Thank you for doing it within white spaces and in Princeton as a whole. And I can't wait to see you do it in this country when you leave this place.
So that's what I decided to do. I applied for a scholarship for people that wanted to be public service leaders called the Truman Scholarship. And in the process of doing that, I had to tell them where I wanted to go to grad school. And the person that was working with me on my application suggested that I look at this school called University of Chicago School of Social Service Administration. It was a social work, but it was meant to prepare you for government and policy and advocacy and all these different things. So I ended up visiting the program through a visit program that I heard about for minority students. And it seemed perfect for me because I could explore my interest in poverty, criminal justice, education, all these things I was interested in. And it was in Chicago where so much stuff is actually happening around organizing and activism. So I applied to that program, but then I also applied to this program called the Project 55 Fellowship, which allows Princeton students to go work at a nonprofit after graduating for a year. And so I went and worked at a nonprofit where they were providing reentry services to people that were formerly incarcerated. And working in that job just very much solidified my belief that people in the criminal justice system you know, in the reentry space, there's this thing about everybody deserves a second chance, everybody deserves a second chance. But that was kind of solidifying for me that people in the criminal legal system often haven't gotten a fair first chance. And that's why it was so important for me to do this fellowship, because I had been learning about all these things on an Ivy campus, but they were affecting people in the cities where Black people live and low income people are living. And so I really wanted to do that fellowship, to be in community with people and learn about what was really going on from people that were really experiencing it and doing something about it. And so that experience was really impactful, and it just solidified my commitment to want to continue the work. And so I went back for my master's. I went to my master's in the programs for social service administration. I focused on policy, and I focused specifically on criminal justice. I got to take classes on prison abolition, police reform, working with justice-involved populations, all these different things that just continue to deepen my understanding and knowledge of criminal justice and policy, and even direct practice, because it was a social work degree. So I also learned about how to deliver direct services, and it just continued to build my passion. I, did research projects about criminal justice issues, and I did a second-year internship at a law firm where I got to write mitigation reports, which were these reports where people are facing time and you're writing a report of their life to try to help the judge see why they should have compassion and understand the context that might have led to them having that case. And just working with clients who were incarcerated and hearing what really led them to get there just made me more and more passionate, to the point where I just knew that when I graduated, I wanted to do justice work. I wanted to specifically advocate for reform in the criminal legal system. So when I graduated my master's program, that's what I was applying for, that's what I was looking for, and I landed at this organization called the Chicago Community Bond Fund, where I get to advocate for pretrial justice reform. On one hand, our organization pays bonds for people that can't afford it, and on the other hand, we advocate for the end of money bond. And the crazy thing is, the bill that we were advocating for when I came on staff last year, we just got it passed a couple months, it just got signed into law last month. So it's kind of crazy, because I've gone from being a student activist to being in this space where I am really, advocating for policy changes and seeing things that might really affect the community where I'm at on a larger scale. So it's really, really cool to be a part of. I'm pretty much living my dream, and this is just the beginning. I intend to dedicate my entire career to social justice work, to fighting for my people, to fighting for change, for a more just society, a more just world. And I am excited to see how we together and with other people that are doing this work can leave this world way, way better than we found it. And so the last thing that I want to touch on is just key ways that God has been with me in this journey. So the key ways that God has been with me in my journey of fighting for justice is there's 5 key things that I can think of. One is He's given me the passion for it. The more that I learned about these things, the more that I just became really, really passionate about it. And I've learned over time that the desires that we have in our heart are often from God. And so I really realized that, I think that God might be showing me that something is on my heart for this, because this really, really resonates with me and I really care a lot about it. He also gave me provision. He provided education. He provided opportunities for me to have internships and different experiences that really helped me to come into greater knowledge, have more experience of ways that I could really make a change. And that really made a difference for me and just growing closer to this calling. The next thing that He did was He sent His presence, because at times doing this work was really, really hard. I got burnt out when I was a student activist. At times of doing work with people that are incarcerated, it was just so much trauma that I was exposed to through learning their stories that it was so heavy sometimes. But in those times, God's presence really came and visited me, and He really confirmed for me that He called me to this work, and He comforted me in the midst of a lot of the pain of what I was going through and what my people were going through. And I have another video about that called Finding God in the Face of Injustice if you want to see it. I'll link it. The other thing He did was He sent people. He has sent people along my path that have helped me to find my way, as far as finding the right grad programs, finding the right internships, finding the right possible directions for my life. And that has been so, so key in me getting to where I am. And the last thing that He did was He gave me purpose. And when I say He confirmed that I was called to this work, I literally have received prophetic words at Christian conferences and things of that nature where people told me, I see you being a voice for the voiceless. I see you smashing poverty. I see you bringing the scales of justice. God's giving you compassion for these issues, and He's going to give you more understanding of what to do about it. And it's given me a sense of I'm meant to do this work, and God is with me, and God is going to bring me through it. And He's definitely been faithful to do that. So I hope that hearing about the things that I've done and the way that I've gotten to this point is encouraging you, and also to know that by God being with me in this, He can be with you in your journey to whatever it is that you're called to do. So thank you so much for watching. Continue to tap into the Bring Myself and God channel, where I'm bringing you all things Brie and all things God. And I'll see you next time.